So welcome. My name is Dr. Grace Telesco, and we are here with Ed Denzel from Unfound. Ed and I have had a great collaboration, and we did a live Facebook Live about a month ago, I think.
Time flies, over a month ago, yes.
It was, yeah. And
Time
so it was so well received that we decided to do another one, and we will do ongoing. Ed will be a regular guest on my show, especially starting in the fall. And what we thought we would do this time, because I'm teaching currently a few undergraduate courses. One is in constitutional issues. The other is criminal investigation. The third is in policing. And the fourth is survey issues in criminal justice. So I thought, and that's the reason why we're doing it at 1:30 in the afternoon. You're like, why are we doing it at 1:30 and not at night? We usually do it at night, but we're doing it in the afternoon to accommodate the students. So I invited some of my selected brightest of the brightest students to be on the show today, so that they can listen to the case that Ed is going to present, and then they can ask some thought-provoking questions as it relates to the case, as it relates to the investigation. So the ongoing investigation, which it's actually
Still
right now, it's an unsolved missing persons case. Right. So Ed, I'm going to let you first introduce yourself, then I'm going to have the students come on and introduce themselves. So please tell us a little bit about you, your work, Unfound.
Okay, sure. I'm Ed Denzel. I host the Missing Persons program, Unfound. I started it in September 2016. Over that time, we have covered over 170 disappearances, mostly in the United States, but we've also covered a few in Canada. And we've actually covered one in Africa, where an American citizen disappeared in Africa. That was one of the first disappearances we covered way back in 2016. I do not do this program myself. I have a crew of assistants that assist me behind the scenes. They all have their specific jobs. I'll name them right now: Emily, Cherie, Carrie, Heather, Eric, and Natasha. And we do this program every week. It comes out every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And the most important aspect, I think, of what we do at Unfound is we go right to the people who have been affected by these missing persons cases the most, and that's the family. We mainly have on mothers of adult children who have been on the program, but we've had fathers, we've had siblings, we've had children who have lost parents to disappearances. And at Unfound, we do not discriminate in any way. If there's a family out there that wants to find their missing loved one, we're here to help. We don't care if the person had a criminal record, as we'll be talking about today with Cameron Remmer. We don't care what else they were involved in. They may have been the perfect person or the most imperfect person. We don't care about ethnicity, race, gender, sexual orientation. If there's a family out there that wants to try to figure out what happened to their loved one, that's why we're here. And as we continue through 2020, some of these cases that we've covered in the past few years are getting resolved. And that's good news. And I'd like to think that we at least had a little help in that, maybe not total credit, but maybe just a little credit in raising the profile of some of these disappearances. That's what we do.
Great. Thank you so much, Ed, for being with us again, taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. And now you're an associate with NSU, Abraham Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice.
By the way, I'm down there and visit sometime soon.
Yes, you will someday when we all can see each other again in the flesh. Right. Absolutely. I'm Dr. Grace Telesco. I'm a full-time faculty member at Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice, and I teach in the undergrad and the graduate program and the PhD program. I'm a former law enforcement officer, spent 20 years serving the city of New York in the NYPD, and retired at the rank of lieutenant. Was a police trainer for many, many years, commanding officer of the recruitment section, as well as the commanding officer of the behavioral science department at the police academy for a couple of years there. And then I ended my career, I guess one could say, the most painful work of my career, as well as the most powerful work, which was as a first responder at Ground Zero, working directly with families for about a year. So that's me, a little bit about me, and I wanna bring my students on now, if they can. I forgot the order, but if one at a time they can pop in, just unmute yourself, put your video on, introduce yourself, tell us, what program are you associated with, either the undergrad or the graduate program, and what course you're currently enrolled in. So I believe we're going to start with Theo.
Hi, my name is Fiorella Rossi, and I'm a senior at Nova Southeastern University. I'm an undergraduate student, a criminal justice major, and I'm in Dr. Telesco's constitutional issues class.
Great, welcome. And so Marielle, I think, was next, right? Yeah.
Hi. My name is Marielle Few, and I'm an undergrad at NSU. I'm currently in the courses of constitutional issues and criminal investigations. I'm doing a major in criminal justice.
Welcome. Excellent. And then we have David, I think, is next.
Hi, folks. My name is David Troxel. I'm currently finishing up my undergrad at NSU. I've taken many courses with Dr. Telesco, and here shortly, I look forward to joining her master's program. But of course, I'm going to need those letters of recommendation.
You got it, David. No problem. Gladly. Who's next? Sharika? Oh, no, Tiffany. Tiffany, I'm sorry. Oh, fine. Sure.
I'm Sharika Lewis. I'm a graduate. I'm taking surveys to criminal justice, for juvenile justice, and I don't know what else to say, so I'm just listening.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And finally, Tiffany. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tiffany Pohl. I am an undergraduate criminal justice major and forensic science minor at Nova, and I'm currently taking constitutional issues with Dr. Telesco.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also, I'm going to kind of stop my video for a little bit for, Ed is going to lay the groundwork of the case. He's going to talk about why he selected the case, why it's so important and relevant at this time. And then he'll just kind of give me instructions, because I have a couple of pictures that I'll share. I'll share my computer screen with you during whenever it is that he directs me to do so. And then when he's finished with laying the groundwork for us, then I'm going to invite all of my students to return by turning their videos on, unmuting themselves, and asking those important questions. Now I'm also monitoring the Facebook. So if you see me looking down, I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to monitor the comments. We have about 14 people right now watching us live. We have Jill is with us, and Jasmine. We have Ida is with us. We have Jessica and Dr. Kushner. They're all watching, and I'm hoping that we can have some thought-provoking discussion as well. So without any further ado, Ed Denzel, it's all you.
Okay, thanks. Yes, Cameron Remmer. First, I think I have to tell you how I found out about his disappearance in the first place. And actually, I found out about his disappearance along with some other disappearances that happened in San Francisco around the same time, in the same kind of area of San Francisco. And all of these young men were around the same age. And let me see if I can name all of them off the top of my head. Cameron Remmer, Sean Dickerson, Sean Seedy, Christian Hughes, and Jackson Miller are the five. And that caught my attention sometime in 2018. And from the outside, you could believe that all of them disappeared for the same reasons. And so got into that, trying to figure out if that was certainly the case, because really all these five young men disappeared within blocks of each other over the course of about 5 years. What's going on? And so eventually I was able to talk to some members of some of their families, not all of their families, everyone but Sean Seedy's family I've talked to. And then we ended up covering Cameron's disappearance on Unfound in late 2019. And then Jackson Miller's disappearance we covered in early 2020. And overall, I think at this point, I can tell you that these young men did not all disappear for the same reasons. But in getting into each of these disappearances, seeing the specifics of each, I kind of centered on Cameron's as something that I thought we at Unfound needed to work on a lot more because of what just kind of scratching the surface we discovered. What happened was that in the course of contacting his mother, Valerie, a main point jumped out to me, and it's something that I think probably only people who have covered 170 disappearances would realize, is that it gets somewhat peculiar when somebody is kicked out of a hotel and then their cell phone use stops at virtually the same time, which is what happened for Cameron on October 6th, 2011. And so I wanted to try to find out why that was. Maybe there was a very good reason for that, or maybe it was not such a great reason. Luckily, Valerie and the people around her daughter, and some friends of Cameron's over the course of late 2011 into 2012, they themselves did fantastic work as amateurs, as family members, something that I don't see a lot in my work. Mainly what I see are family members, at least at the beginning, just sitting back and allowing the police to do their work, which seems like the right thing to do, but many times it's not. And Cameron's family didn't, and his friends did not sit back and wait for the San Francisco Police Department to do their work. They went up there to San Francisco and they started asking questions on their own. Now, what came from that was a very, very accurate timeline of what Cameron was doing while he was in San Francisco. Something important to note is that he didn't just get there on like October 4th or October 5th. In San Francisco. He's actually from the San Diego area, and he had been up there for over a week. Although when he went there, nobody seemed to know that he was planning on staying that long. The perception is that he would just be there a few days. He ended up being there for over a week. He went to a concert. He met a young woman that he hung out with for a few days. But to be honest with you, and this is where I have to reveal this, he was up there for illegal reasons. He was up there. He had brought a bunch of pens, what they call them in the drug dealing business, up to San Francisco. And he had hooked up with some guys up there who had hash, something like that. And they were going to put it in these pens. He was going to give them. He went up there with $30,000. He was going to pay them for these drugs and to do this work for him. And then he was going to take this all back to Southern California to sell. And that's what he was doing there. And so he was waiting around for them to do this work for him and that he was paying for before he could come back to Southern California. And how he was going to get back to Southern California is still something we're not sure of all of these years later, because he never did get a plane ticket. So we're just not sure. So he was up there this whole time for that over a week. And he was around some shady characters. And I've one in particular was John Caleb Marks. I sent a couple articles to Dr. Telesco that she could look at. He had been in trouble with the law well before 2011, mostly involving drugs. And that was one of the last people that Cameron saw before he disappeared that October 6th, 2011. But once again, on Unfound, we don't care about such things. If there is a family that wants to find out what happened to their loved one, we don't care if they were perfect, how perfect, how imperfect. We don't care. We cover many disappearances of both men and women who have lengthy criminal records. We don't care. We give each disappearance an equal amount of attention. Once again, we don't care. So in Cameron's case, yes, he was doing something illegal in California. Our standpoint is if he had been caught, he should have been put away in jail for whatever the sentence would be. But he's missing. And so our job is to try to help a family figure out what happened to him. And should he still be alive these days, and if he is charged with those drug charges, then he should go to jail. But that's not our concern. We're trying to help his family. And so that's what we concentrated on for 2019. So he was up there. He'd stayed at a variety of different hotels up there. But the last place that he stayed at was probably one of the nicest hotels in the United States, called the Fairmont. And in fact, my understanding is that when Barack Obama was president, that is where he would stay with, of course, his Secret Service detail when he would go to San Francisco. And I actually, in my research, I actually got to talk to a couple people who worked at the Fairmont who actually got to meet President Obama while he stayed there. That is how ritzy or fancy this hotel is. Well, that's where Cameron Remmer spent his last couple nights in San Francisco. Once again, waiting for this work to be done. Well, on October 6th, the work was done. And he had gotten this product back from this guy, John Caleb Marks. And he had it, Cameron had it in these bags. And he went back to the Fairmont on the evening of October 6th, 2011, even though he had no registration to stay there that night. And once again, that's still a mystery to this day. But one of the bellhops who I spoke to, I tracked him down, handled these bags with these drugs in them, even though he didn't know at the time there were drugs in them. And they put them in like a storage room at the hotel. So Cameron, that night, that evening into that night, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, he's in there by himself, just hanging out, talking to people. I spoke to the bellhop. I spoke to the food and beverage manager who encountered Cameron at the time, was able to track him down. And he spoke to Cameron that night, and he said, Cameron, he was by himself, just going from group to group in this one bar that they have there. Seemed a little strange, but not overtly so. This guy said that they'd had way more rambunctious or stranger people in his time working there. He does not work there anymore, but nothing that really bothered him in any way. No reason that he thought that security should be called or anything else. Well, at some point, as Cameron's family eventually found out, at some point around 11 o'clock, Cameron did something. We're still not sure what that is because the security people won't talk to me or any of my assistants. And they weren't even that forthcoming, I don't think, with the San Francisco Police Department. Something happened and Cameron got kicked out of the hotel. Now, what is noteworthy about this is he got kicked out, but he didn't take his drugs with him. Those drugs remained in that room for a few days after his disappearance. And so his family eventually figures out that he is missing. They decide to go up there, find out what's going on. They get his phone records, etc. And they find out from hotel security at the time, once again, way back in late 2011, that he had gotten kicked out, although they were never given the names of the security guards on duty at that time that night. They just said, well, he was doing something, allegedly running around inside the hotel, and they had to kick him out. Well, what they also discovered in getting his phone records, and once again, I've stated many times, these are the most complete phone records I've ever seen, and I've looked at a lot of them over the last 3.5 years. But what is obvious is that right around the time that Cameron got kicked out of the Fairmont, his cell phone use stopped. The phone was still on, but anybody who tried to call him, no answer. He also had no outgoing texts right around that 11:21 p.m. Time frame of October 6th, 2011. And that's where I kind of came into this in early January, February of 2019. I found out about that. And so I was like, well, that's weird. And especially when you consider that this is a fairly fancy hotel that has its own security with video cameras, etc. You wonder how that can happen. Now, of course, you should know that regarding going back to all of these 5 young men is one of the beliefs is that they jumped off the San Francisco Bridge, because the Golden Gate Bridge is the #1 place to commit suicide in the United States. And I actually watched a documentary about that came out a few years before Cameron disappeared in my research for Cameron's disappearance. I'm not convinced that any of these men went off the bridge, and I'm surely not convinced that Cameron did. But I think that's kind of the way it was thought of at the time, that he got kicked out of there. Cameron did have some mental issues that could pop up once in a while, bipolar, very manic, very energetic, and then very laid back. As anybody who's dealt with people with bipolar disorder, if they're not taking their medication, that's the way they can be. Cameron could be like that sometimes. And so they kind of just dismissed it. Well, I come along in 2019. I said, well, maybe we need to look at this disappearance a different way. And so that's what we started to do in 2019. And these are some of the things that we were able to discover. That the San Francisco Police Department, and I could name one of the investigators, her name is Mckenzie, got involved in the disappearance, and she just wasn't involved in Cameron's disappearance. In her job was mainly missing persons cases at the time. So she was responsible for some of these other missing persons cases I've already mentioned from San Francisco. And she looked into Cameron's. Well, my understanding is they tried to get video from the Fairmont from that night, very shortly, not long after Cameron disappeared, and the Fairmont wouldn't give it to them. And the reason was, well, we have a lot of famous people, and we don't want their privacy invaded, so we're not going to give it to the San Francisco Police Department. Now, the frustrating part is it doesn't seem that the San Francisco Police Department ever ended up getting a subpoena or a warrant, whatever you would call it, to force them to give up the video from that night. So that is a major flaw, I think, in the original investigation of Cameron's disappearance. I think the other noteworthy part, and I'm still trying to, by the way, to track down Mckenzie. I think I have a correct phone number for her, but she doesn't answer the phone. So I've tried many times to reach her to talk about this. She's retired now, so I would hope that she would be a little more open than if she were still working for the SFPD. The other big point, and probably even a bigger point, is that I was able to track down the 2 security guards from that night. And I'll give their names because this is just a fact. The 2 men that were working that night were Dan Inouye and Steve Cannon. You should know that the Fairmont Hotel does not have what you would call its own security. It is contracted out to a company called, at least at the time, it was First Alarm. So these people who worked security at the Fairmont did not get a check from the Fairmont. They got a check from their company. Like I said, it's like a bidding process. And the way I was able to track them down was in a very old website that isn't even used anymore. I was able to find the name of a guy. His name was Chris Handesides, who worked in security at the Fairmont at the time. He was like the contact person. Should there be an earthquake? Of course, that would be a concern all the time in San Francisco. I was able to track him down on Facebook, and he got back to me. And it was of course, it was 2019. It's 8 years later, and he had stopped working for First Alarm and actually stopped being a security guard not long after. He's in a totally different profession now. But he was, through going back, trying to figure out what was going on at the time, he was able to figure out who would have been working that night. And I was able to track Dan down. My assistant Cherie was able to track down Steve down. And in both cases, we got blown off. Cherie ended up getting at least one email response from Steve, but he says he doesn't even remember the night, doesn't even know if he was working that night, doesn't remember Cameron, on and on and on. Whereas with Dan Inouye, I was able to get an email and phone number for him. And over the course of about 3 months, I called him 5 times and texted him or emailed him 5 times. Certainly not anything that anybody would call harassment. And he ended up blowing me off. And on top of that, and I sent the message that he sent to Cameron's mother, He claimed that I was harassing him. He claimed that I was a scary individual, and on and on and on. I'm not going to read it word for word, but I did send it to Dr. Telesco so she could read it. And anybody who knows me knows I'm not like that, knows that that's not the kind of program we do at Unfound. And it seemed like an overtly outrageous response to me just wanting to ask him what he remembered about that night. Now, what he told Valerie is that he remembers Cameron and he remembers escorting him out of the Fairmont that night, but he doesn't say why they did it, who called them, what direction Cameron went. Doesn't say why Cameron left his drugs inside the building, didn't take his luggage with him. It just, the story that Dan tells has no context. It just says, yeah, I remember him, and we took him out. And of course, his response, you know, myself and my assistants over the course of the last few years, we contact a lot of people. Sometimes we reach them, sometimes we don't. It just depends. This is the most unique response that we've ever gotten. And like I said, I was not harassing him. I don't even live in California. I live in Florida. I tried calling him about 5 times over 3 months. That could hardly be called harassment. But this is how one of the security guards reacted to me wanting to talk to him about what happened that night at the Fairmont regarding Cameron Remmer. And I was able to, it took some time to put this all together, but I think what it exposed is that Cameron's disappearance needs to have new eyes on it by the San Francisco Police Department, because of how these 2 security guards who surely had interaction with Cameron that night and how they don't want to talk about it. Now, on top of the fact, I don't think that the San Francisco Police Department at the time in 2011 ever spoke to them. I don't even know if they know who they are. And on top of that, I called the Fairmont sometime last summer and they do have a head of security, but also works for First Alarm, who was actually working in there at the time in 2011. He still works there now. And the story he told me last summer is different from the one that he told Cameron's mother and other family members at the time back in 2011. Now, that could be dismissed as being an issue of being 8 years later, or it could be something else, but he surely got some of the facts wrong, glaringly so. And that would probably be a little too complicated to get in right at this time. All I will tell you is what he told me and what the facts are 2 different things. Once again, I could kind of dismiss it as being, it's 8 years later, he got a little things confused, but I do not think that when it comes to the 2 security guards who actually got together or whatever happened with Cameron that night and allegedly escorted him out. Now, the other reason that I chose this disappearance is because there's been some action on Cameron's disappearance recently. And I sent the picture to Dr. Telesco. Within the last, I'm going to say 6 weeks, maybe going back to April, we're doing this on, what is today? June 15th, 2020. Sometime maybe in late April, there is a group in San Francisco. San Francisco has a lot of homeless people there. So they go around talking to them, making sure that they're getting food, if they need any attention, and just to try to figure out maybe some of them are missing. Well, they came across a man and they took a picture of him. And some people think that this actually could be Cameron Remmer. I will admit that I'm not so sure. All of you watching this can be the judges on that. There he is. He's being shown there. The problem we have with that picture is that he's looking down at his phone. We don't have him looking right at the camera. I suppose he looks like he could be a homeless person. But as I've stated, I'm not trying to influence people either way, but I'm just telling you as a guy who's looked at a lot of missing persons pictures and over the last 3.5 years, in a way, this guy almost looks a little bit too much like Cameron. We have to remember this is now almost 9 years later. If he was living on the streets and moving from area to area over the course of 8 to 9 years, it would surely, I think, take an effect on his appearance. If we are to believe that as Cameron, he almost looks too much like 2011 Cameron and not what would be 2020 Cameron. But that's up for all of you to decide. My other concern is anytime a picture like this is taken, why couldn't the person just get him looking at the camera? Why not just video him and then freeze frame it at a point when he is actually looking at the camera? I would also add that he's, I think that is an iPhone that he has there. How did he pay for that? Where is Cameron? If this is Cameron, where has he been staying? How has he been staying off the radar, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is how I look at it from a reporter, researcher, investigator point of view. I hope it's Cameron. I've told that to his mother over the last 6 weeks a couple times. I hope it's Cameron. I also have, been around long enough to tell families don't ride the emotional roller coaster, because a lot of them end up hearing about, hey, we think my son was seen here, and they'll go there and it doesn't turn out to be anything. And so they have to ride this roller coaster up and down, which I don't think is healthy. So I always try to tell the families that I work with, to restrain your expectations and just let things play out. But that's, in general, the disappearance of Cameron Remmer. Now, you should know, if you go to iTunes, Spotify, Podomatic, Podbean, Stitcher, and listen to the episode that I did with his mother as the guest back in November, December of 2019, the episode's like over 4 hours long. Unfound is known for doing some longer episodes, but I think that's the longest one ever. But the interview with Valerie was very long. And then after that, I went through everything that we did in 2019 to try to get some more facts, more information on Cameron's case. That's why the episode is so long. But I would urge you to go do that after we're done today, so you can hear for yourself everything that in more detail that we went through over the course of 2019. You'll hear more about the phone records, more about Daniel Inouye, Steve Cannon, First Alarm, these other people that Cameron ran into while he was there. You'll hear all of that in that interview that I did with Valerie. And what Dr. Telesco has posted up right now is a lot of people believe, once again, not just Cameron, but some of these other young men who disappeared, that they all went and jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. I'm not convinced of that at all, but I just did a map for today's show showing where the Fairmont is, and then showing how far it is to the Golden Gate Bridge. Of course, by car, it's 15 minutes. It's 6.4 miles. Of course, to walk it might take a few hours. And we also have to remember that at the time that Cameron disappeared, it was at night, and the Golden Gate Bridge is not open for pedestrians at night anymore. They changed that around 2008, 2009, a couple years before Cameron disappeared. So that's where the investigation, that's where the case stands right now. And so that's, I'm just going to stop right there. Maybe people want to jump in. Dr. Telesco, we can continue our discussion regarding Cameron's case in this forum.
Okay, great. I was trying to actually show Cameron today when he disappeared, so that people could have an opportunity to see this picture versus the other picture. And I'm just going to try to get the other picture up.
Okay.
Again. So there's a picture that is a good, accepted as being a good representation from him from 2011. Yes, that picture you just put there. Yeah, I don't know why, for some reason. All right, I'm going to just do my desktop for a minute. So here's, let me just get all these pictures up. So we've got, now I don't know where they are. Okay.
I think there's no denying that there is a similarity between them. But once again, when somebody goes about getting a picture of some homeless person and they can't even get the person looking at the camera, then it's easy for me to talk. I wasn't the person trying to do it, but if that's what you do, then I think you maybe just be patient enough, or use a telephoto lens or a really good lens from across the street, wait for the person to look up and snap it then, or do a video and do a screenshot. But that of course wasn't done. And, anybody, looking down like this could be anybody.
Right. Exactly. So, I'm trying again. I'm going to try again now. Let's see. Maybe I just do portion of the screen. Okay. So here we go.
There's Cameron. Yes. From 2011.
Are we seeing that now? I'm going to just check my, I'm on my
seeing
phone,
it.
also watching Facebook.
I'm seeing
And,
it. Yeah, that is what is considered to be an accurate picture of Cameron from 2011. I don't know exactly when it was taken, but that is one of the pictures that has been out since the beginning of his disappearance, that was put out by the family.
Great. Okay. So, and I want to show the Fairmont for a moment. The Fairmont is here.
There we go. Very fancy, as you can see. Probably Dr. Telesco, since you were in NYPD, probably very similar to the Plaza or the Waldorf, something like that.
Exactly.
I've never been to San Francisco, but that's my understanding. Very fancy, like I said. I think at least President Obama has been there, among other politicians and dignitaries, famous people, actors, etc. Stay there when they go to San Francisco.
Yeah. Now there's the last one I want to put up, because I don't know if I was able to do that earlier, is the map. I wanted to make sure that I got the map nice and nice and large for people to see. And I can't get it again. So now it won't let me stop sharing.
That's all right. You can just post the picture on your page, maybe afterwards.
Yeah, that's what I'll do.
Mm-hmm. It was you're talking about the picture, the one I made, the one you just posted before, just the distance from the Fairmont to the Golden Gate Bridge. They're really, they're really not close to each other. 6 miles. I mean, I think about 6 miles, from where I live right now. I don't consider, and I live in a city situation. It's kind of far.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think it's reasonable for people to think that Cameron went to the bridge that night or the next day or anytime and jumped. And one of the things you learn about watching that documentary is that 99% of people who jump off the bridge are seen by others. So,
yeah.
And 99% of the people who jump off the bridge, their bodies are recovered. So this is what leads me to believe that Cameron's certainly not, and to maybe a lesser extent, all the other young men that we mentioned, I don't think any of them went off the bridge.
Right. So here's what I want to do now. I want to ask my students to all come back on, share their videos, unmute yourselves, unless you actually keep yourself muted unless you have a question, and I hope you do have a question. I am going to ask one question first that I have, and then I want to give Ed an opportunity to answer these questions. And by the way, in the chat box on Facebook, I did put all of the links to a couple of things. One is I put some links here for our programs, for our undergrad program, for our master's program, and for our PhD program. So there's a links there. You can click on those if you're interested in pursuing a degree at the undergrad level, bachelor's degree in criminal justice, master's degree in criminal justice, or PhD in criminal justice. Just click on the link and it'll take you right to our programs and our various course selections. But I want to just give Ed an opportunity to write this down a couple of questions that have been raised. So one question here, the first question is from Jessica Rodriguez, who's asking, why wouldn't the hotel tell San Francisco Police Department why he was kicked out? Do they have to?
Well, the story that you want me to answer that right at the second, right?
Sure, I guess why don't we do that? We'll take one
Okay,
question
great.
at a time.
What the family was told when they went to San Francisco is they got the story that at some point Cameron started running around inside the hotel, acting crazy. And so that's why security got called and he was escorted out. That is the story. There's no proof of that. That's just what they were told when they started. They went to the Fairmont. And like I said, they talked to a variety of people. They talked to a bellhop. They talked to a beverage manager. They talked to the head of the security at the time, a guy who is still there. And you should know there's 2 other security guards that are not, they don't work there anymore, neither does Chris Andecides, who was a very good contact for me. And I certainly appreciate all the help that he gave me regarding the Fairmont. But that's the story they got. The problem is there's no video of it. In addition, even one of the security guards from last year said it was uneventful. So a guy running around the Fairmont at night and he says, oh, it's just uneventful. It really didn't stick out to me.
Yeah.
We just don't know. This is just what people have said. Now, Dr. Telesco, maybe you might have more experience than I do. I can tell you in all the disappearances that I've covered. Now, we don't talk a lot about video evidence. We sometimes have it. Most of the time don't. But I can't ever remember of like a convenience store or a restaurant or an apartment complex withholding video when the police wanted it. I don't know if we've ever covered a case like that ever. In Unfound, like I said, 170 disappearances. This is why it stuck out in Cameron's case. And that's one of the reasons we decided we were going to look into this a little bit more. I mean, how would you look at that as ex-NYPD?
Well, I mean, the question is, why didn't they get a subpoena? So, I mean, that would have been something that, you'd want to do is to get a subpoena and have if they weren't going to cooperate and just voluntarily comply with giving the video over, then certainly, they could go to a judge. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my constitutional issues students. So I believe that, just raise your hand, my con issues students, raise your hand. So what pops into your mind about why the police couldn't demand the video without a subpoena?
I definitely think that they could have gotten like a warrant because there's like probable cause. And I feel like there's factors that happen that, like, for the family's sake and also for the investigation, like, don't they want to know like the drugs, where they're coming from and like who's involved? Wouldn't they want to sit down with the person that's missing, like find them at least for like that too?
But here's the question. So why can't the police go in and just seize the surveillance video, if there was any at the hotel, which I'm sure there was? Why couldn't they just do that and bypass getting a warrant? What would be the reason? Mariella, do you want to respond to that? Or Theo? What amendment? So I'm putting them on the spot. Now this is live. This is like your worst nightmare as a
Wouldn't that be under the Fourth Amendment?
What is it?
Wouldn't that be under the Fourth Amendment for like unreasonable searches?
Absolutely. Yes. So you would have to get a warrant. The question is now, where's my criminal investigation people? Raise your hand. Also Mariella. Isn't there somebody else in criminal investigation, or just Mariella is the only one? The only one is Mariella. So Mariella, good investigative skills here and good investigative strategy to not get a subpoena so that you could see the surveillance video.
I don't think it was a good. I mean, I don't know, it's kind of difficult because like when it comes with the amendment, it's like difficult to see how you'd be able to search a surveillance video. I don't know. I'm not sure.
So, well, in terms of searching, because David has a great question, I'm just going to let him read it, just say his question out loud in a minute. But I have a question, like, why can't security go in? You said that he left the drugs and he left his luggage behind.
Left everything behind. Yes.
So if that's the case, then what was found? What was found in the room?
Well, he didn't have they were keeping that stuff for him, but he did not have a registration. He did not have a room reserved for that night. He had stayed there the night before, and because they remembered him, they allowed him to keep his stuff in there while he went and hung out in the bar and everything. But the belief is that he did not have a room to go to that night, and he was still looking for somewhere that he was going to stay for that night, if he was going to sleep at all. We just don't know. But it is, I think the first young woman who spoke, she brought up an interesting point. It's one thing that they didn't get involved in the disappearance and didn't want to get the video or whatever. But once the drugs were discovered, and they were just discovered a few days later, once they started going through the stuff, they didn't do it then either. And like I said, it was $30,000 worth, probably street value way higher than that.
Absolutely. So there's a disconnect there in the investigation for sure. A big dropping of the ball.
If I could talk to Ann Mckenzie, would know, but she doesn't return my calls.
Yeah. So David, you want to.
Well, just to kind of throw my hat in the ring on that last one, I would assume that the police department would, once there's illegal activity, drugs, anything that's confiscated or found by the hotel staff, they would want to turn that over to the police department, obviously to limit their liability. But also, you would think that they would want to aid the police in any type of investigation regarding those drugs or illegal substances, and would be a lot more forthcoming with any type of evidence, so that they could find that individual, if for no other reason but to keep them out of the hotel, as far as, bringing criminal activity there.
Yes.
You're right. And the way the drugs were even discovered is that there was a smell, and the bag was sitting there, and it was like, what the heck is smelling in this place? And they finally went to Cameron's stuff, opened it up, and that's when they found it. They called the police. And of course, at the same time, his family was already realizing that it was missing. The police took it. My understanding is that those drugs were in police evidence at the San Francisco Police Department until 2018, and then they destroyed it. They had that for 7 years, and they never questioned John Caleb Marks, who is a known drug dealer in the area. All these other people who were involved in putting this deal together. To my knowledge, the San Francisco Police Department didn't talk to any of them.
Interesting.
I have a question.
Yes, I put your video off because it looked like you needed some time to get settled. So let me just turn your video on and go ahead, Sharika. Sharika joins us from the graduate program, Masters in Criminal Justice. Go ahead, Sharika.
Oh, my question is, the night before, how did he pay for his hotel room? And do you think those guys that kicked him out of the hotel, do you think they knew him and maybe they did something with his body?
Sharika, did you understand, Ed? Because I didn't quite follow.
I did.
If you don't mind, Sharika, if you could say it again so that our listeners on Facebook can hear and understand completely your question. Go ahead. Just give me one more time. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was asking the night before, how did he pay for his room at that hotel? And do you think that the guys that kicked him out of the hotel, the security guards that you're talking about, do you think maybe they knew about the drugs and had something to do with his body?
Two very good questions. I'm glad that you brought both of them up. First of all, the way that he got to stay at the Fairmont for this couple nights is one of the other guys that he was doing this business with paid for those nights. Cameron himself did not pay. I think that he had stayed there maybe the 2 nights prior to October 6th, something like that. That was paid for by somebody else. As far as the security guards, being that the drugs were still found in the bellhop room afterwards, I'm not convinced that anybody in the hotel knew anything about the drugs in that bag. Okay, I'm not Because I think that if they had known that and wanted to take advantage of it, that bag would have been long gone. If they knew something happened to Cameron, then the next thing they would have done is take those drugs and sell them themselves. But that's not what happened. So I'm not convinced the security guards, whether they're involved or not, knew anything about the drugs. But what sticks out, I'm sure, to everybody is what kind of, let's just call him what he is, what kind of drug dealer leaves a hotel and doesn't take his drugs with him if he left by choice. If he was escorted off, why didn't he say, hey, I got to get my bags? Why didn't he do that? We don't know.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Two great questions. Thank you.
Yeah, very good. Theo, go.
My question is, you mentioned that the family got a hold of his phone records, and that's how they were able to tell when the phone went offline, per se.
Yep.
But did anyone ever look into who he last was in touch with, or whether he had his location on?
Yes. Here's once again, I do not have the records in front of me, but I'm speaking about this off the top of my head. The phone calls, those last few phone calls were either about him getting a ticket to fly back to San Diego the next day. He knew that he did not have a registration to stay at the Fairmont. So there is at least one call to another hotel in the area, not right down the street, but somewhere in San Francisco. The call, as I remember it, was only a couple minutes long. There's no proof that Cameron ever went to that hotel, walked to that hotel, took a taxi, did anything to get over to this other hotel. In addition, he talked to a guy on the phone who we believe at the time was either in San Diego or Arizona. He was not in the San Francisco area. He told this guy, I'm trying to find a room for tonight. And then it's some time later, maybe a half hour later, 20 minutes later, he talked to the same guy again. And he said, I found a place to stay.
Ed, we lost your audio.
Hello.
There you go.
All right.
We missed the last sentence.
Okay. It very well may be that he found a place to stay. Nobody's been able to ever find out where that is. Or he actually might have made arrangements for somebody he ran into at the Fairmont to stay at the Fairmont again that night. And that brings in something else. I don't know if we want to get into it. We only have a few minutes left, but there is a woman that he ran into while he was in San Francisco. I cannot say her name. I know who she is. I cannot say her name and describe her, because when those phone records were gotten and the family started going through the records, they were calling every number. They got to this particular woman, and it turns out, I wouldn't call her famous, but she is a woman who was interviewed on the Charlie Rose show at one time. So I'll just leave it at that. Well, it's obvious that she was staying at the Fairmont. Cameron was staying at the Fairmont, and they must have run into each other. And she called him the day he disappeared. And I was able to track down, because I know who she is, what she was doing in San Francisco. She's not from San Francisco, but I found out why she was there. And she had called him right after she had, let's just say, a type of interview there. And obviously she was calling it to get together with him. There's no doubt about that. He never calls her back, according to the records, but it's pretty obvious that she was staying at the Fairmont. And so we have put forward the idea that maybe he was planning to stay with her that night at the Fairmont. No proof of that. The issue is that when the family tried calling her, this woman has threatened to sue anybody who ever brings up her name in relation to Cameron's disappearance.
Wow.
His mother called her, his brother called her, his niece called her, and the police called her. And she threatened all of them.
Wow. So I have a quick question. And then I want to go to the students and ask them for their theories on this. So I'm curious to know if you could, kind of give us a brief kind of like overview real quick on, because we are running out of time,
Mhm.
We might go a little over today, a little bit, but not much. What did the head of security say to you now recently?
Well, the way he reacted to me when I called the Fairmont last summer is that, first of all, you could tell he didn't want to talk to me. What he said to me was, I've talked to the family. There was a documentary done that never made it to TV on camera's disappearance. I took part in the documentary. I did this. I did that. I did this. I did that. What else do I have to say? Is how he reacted. And then what he told me, I asked him, well, why wasn't the video given up, to the San Francisco Police Department? He goes, well, that would have been a decision made by so-and-so who oversaw security that worked for the Fairmont. The only problem was that guy saying that is that guy although he was still employed by the Fairmont, he had been on an extended medical leave because he had pancreatic cancer. He wasn't even working at the building at the time because he was on leave. Now that man unfortunately ended up dying about a month later after Cameron's disappearance. So he wasn't even there to make a decision like that. But this guy says that's who made the decision. And that's where I talked about earlier. Maybe he's just misremembering things. And then another name came up. Well, he could have made the decision. Well, he was the guy that took the man who died's place. That guy didn't even start working there till December, 2 months after Cameron disappeared. So that's what the Fairmont said.
Yeah. Okay. So in other words, just a lot of tomatoes.
It is. Yeah. It's they're telling you everything but what you want to know.
All right. So here's what I'm going to do. I just want to go around a quick survey on all of each student to weigh in if you can. If you don't, no pressure. What's your case theory on this? You're the investigator. You've been given this old unsolved missing persons case. What's your theory? Let's start with David. Go ahead, David.
Well, there's a couple. Obviously, there's a lot going on with this case. My theory, as far as why they may not be willing to give up the video, may have to do with a mystery woman who may or may not have been famous, who threatened to sue basically anybody who revealed her. The video may have showed evidence of her and Cameron both together in some fashion that may be, less desirable than what she had wanted. And my other theory goes out to whoever, I guess, purchased the hotel room for Cameron. That sounds to me like that could have somehow set him up for a specific location to have nearby access to him. Obviously they didn't get the drugs, but they may not have known that at the time. And it may have been some sort of setup, at least from my opinion.
Excellent. Ed, give me the thumbs up or thumbs down on that kind of a case theory.
Those are certainly two theories that we've talked about extensively, both between myself and my assistants and Valerie, his mother. I lean away from the drug dealers having anything to do with this, because you would think if they were to get rid of Cameron, they'd get their drugs first. That's why I kind of lean away from that. We talk a lot about drugs on the program, and the drugs always disappear. They don't end up in police hands. They always disappear.
Right. So that's an interesting, interesting variable there. So Theo, you want to weigh in? Give us your case theory. I mean, if you don't have one, that's okay, because I don't want to pressure you. But what's your take on this case?
I think best case scenario is you mentioned mental illness before, that he suffered from.
Yes, that's true.
Some of that. So I think maybe best case scenario is that he could have had an episode and maybe became disoriented and kind of didn't know what to do or who to contact. I think that would be best case scenario. But my instinct is to want to follow through more with all the parties that were involved, their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation. definitely
Yeah.
taking interests with the security and the hotel and everything. I mean, they have such a reputation and such high stakes that you would think they wouldn't want to jeopardize that, especially with the police.
Exactly.
I
Well
agree.
said. Articulate, right on point. Great. Mariella, you want to weigh in? Case theory? Give it a
Yeah,
shot.
I agree with what Fiorella said. I was thinking about how maybe he had an episode and also he had bipolar. Do you know if he was on medication at the time?
Oh, well, he had medication, but he didn't like taking it.
Right.
From what his family was. So yes, that's a huge variable in this case, as it always is in these types of disappearances. I think you're both right that if that's what happened, then I think that we should maybe look at the idea that he became homeless, and that could be the picture of him. Certainly.
Yeah, so I think since he didn't take his medication and he was also drinking that night, he probably had an episode, and God knows what he did after he got kicked out of the hotel.
Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Mariella. Perfect. And Tiffany, you want to weigh in?
I just basically agree with like everyone's points so far. That's like
Okay. No other theories. Sharika, you want to weigh in?
Yes, the first guy, but maybe I think that he keeps saying that the drugs weren't taken. Maybe at the time when he got kicked out, the person that paid for his room the prior nights, maybe they did something to him, thinking that maybe he had the drugs nearby or they could get to him and just never really could. I don't think he had an episode. I think somebody did something to him and made him disappear, and maybe they threw his body over that bridge. I don't know.
Could be.
Great. Thank you. Okay,
Yes.
good.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
I want to say thank you to our students, to our undergrad students, David, Troxel, Fiorella, Rossi, Mariella, who doesn't have her last name up, but we want to give her last name a shout out. So, Mariella, tell us again your last name.
It's Fune, Mariella Fune.
Awesome. And Tiffany, same.
Tiffany Poe.
Awesome. And Sharika Lewis. So these are our undergrad and our graduate students. Articulate, thank you for your participation today in this show. And Ed, as always, I'm going to give you the last word.
Okay.
It's always a pleasure to have you
Yeah.
on, and we're going to continue to have you
Great.
in the future. So Ed, last words.
Look for the next episode of Unfound this Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern. We're covering the disappearance of Gregory Howells in 1997 from Carmel Valley, California. You can find it on iTunes, Spotify, Podomatic, Stitcher, among many other apps. Maybe you want to join us on Wednesday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern for the Unfound Live Show on YouTube, where I talk about a lot of recent true crime news and I take questions from the audience. And of course, you can find us on Facebook, the group, the page, Instagram, Twitter, the new website, theunfoundpodcast.com. That's everything that's going on with Unfound right now.
Excellent. And and if you're watching us live right now on Facebook, make sure that you like our page, make sure that you get notifications so that you can see upcoming events that are happening, like this Thursday at 7 p.m., Mending the Police Community Divide, Both Sides Matter. That's going to be a very thought-provoking, provocative dialogue, looking at both sides of police use of force. So I hope that you can join us then. And if you're interested in any of our programs, just go to the comments section right now on Facebook, and you can see where we've posted a lot of links to our undergrad, graduate, and PhD programs. This was a great way for you, if you're watching us live, for you to see, this is the product of our programming. This is the product of our courses. This is the product of NSU, Abraham Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice. this is it. These are our brilliant students. And Dr. Kushner, who is the associate dean of the college, says, "I'm so proud of our students." So there you have it. And we've been texting back and forth throughout the show how proud we are of all of you. And Ed, thank you for this, for our collaboration, for our relationship, and we continue in the future to have future programming. So
Great.
Thank you all for joining, and be safe out there. Stay well, and don't forget to tune in to not only Unfound but all of Fischler's Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice programming. Thank you. Have a good afternoon.